Very quickly, 3 words of background about Ambassador Yang. First, something about his background. Secondly, something about his character. Thirdly, something about his topic. He is known in China as a helicopter. A helicopter is someone whose career goes straight up. Born and raised in Shanghai, lived there for 22 years before moving to Beijing. Joined the foreign ministry, was after education at Bath and the London School of Economics, and in 1983 first came and worked there when we first became acquainted and began to work together. It's sometimes said that a diplomat is someone who lies for his country. This is not true of Ambassador Yang. I think you'll feel that he's someone of his word, a man who is not only sincere but says the right things in the right way because it's the right thing to do, and who spent the last 20 years of his life at the center of Sino-American relations, helping to build important bridges between our countries. You'll hear him talk today in terms of topic about how, and those of us who have studied this know this to be true, that the areas of commonality in Sino-American relations are actually greater than areas of difference, even though there are some real differences, and even though there are also some real misunderstandings. This is a man who is focused on building bridges of understanding and diminishing those areas of misunderstanding so that we can focus on the common, even while not losing sight in those few other instances of difference. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Yang.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gary Gong, for your very warm introduction, and thank you very much, Professor Hosinger, for your warm hospitality. I'm very glad to be on this campus. The purpose of my coming to Utah and to BYU is to enhance mutual understanding and friendship and build bridges for future cooperation. BYU is a very important university in the United States. It has already had many connections with China. And on behalf of the Chinese government, I would like to thank President Bateman and the university for taking such a positive attitude towards scholarly and other exchanges with China, and we have benefited a lot from it. And as a small token of our appreciation and of our contribution to this university, I would like to present on behalf of the Chinese side 1,000 books of Chinese language and reference materials. I hope it will be of some use to this university and particularly to the students. And above all, this is a symbol of our friendship and of our dedication to this everlasting exchanges between our two nations and between you, this great institution of education, and those in China. So here I would like to present the books.
On behalf of the university and the Harold B. Lee Library, we're grateful to receive not what you see in front of you here today, but over 1,000 books that have been graciously given to the university. As many of you know, we have a significant Asian collection under the capable direction of Dr. Gail King, and we wish to thank the ambassador for his generous contribution to our collection.
My topic today is Sino-American relationship. I would like to begin my speech by expressing again on behalf of the Chinese government our deep condolences for the victims of the terrorist attack which happened yesterday. Our hearts also go out to the victimized families. We in China strongly oppose and condemn terrorist violence, and I think this should be opposed, and this is being opposed by the whole world. Sino-American relationship is a very important one, and it has traversed a tortuous road. Sometimes I look back on what has happened in the last 20-odd years for this relationship. When the two countries established diplomatic relations in 1979, there was hardly any trade between us. But last year, the total trade volume was about $75 billion. The United States is the second largest trading partner of China. And in terms of accepting China's imports, the United States is number one. There weren't any joint ventures back in 1979 because Deng Xiaoping started his reform and opening up policy only towards the end of 1978. But now there are about 30,000 American invested enterprises in China with a total contractual investment volume of about $70 billion, with about over $30 billion already utilized. In 1979 or so, there was very little human interflow between our two nations. But last year, about 1 million Americans visited China, and many Chinese have come this way. I remember that when Deng Xiaoping came here, it was signed on that occasion the agreement on cooperation on science and technology. And in 1985, another agreement on educational exchanges was signed. What happened, what occurred as a small trickle of students' exchanges has now really become a huge current. There are now 50,000 American Chinese students studying in the United States, and quite a few are on this campus. And tens of thousands of Americans have also studied in China. Apart from the Chinese language, they also study many other subjects. And I'm very glad to learn that on this campus there are more and more people who are studying Chinese. I think studying Chinese will help you to go a long way. And there are many, many people, Americans, now working in China, representing various law firms, business entities, and cultural organizations, and I admire them for their interest in the Chinese language, in our culture, and above all, in expanding the ties between our two nations. On the political side, although there have been ups and downs in our relationship, the relationship has on the whole moved forward. The two countries are now engaged in multi-level dialogue and discussions on a whole range of international issues and on ways to improve and further develop our bilateral ties. This is a very important relationship. As Garrett said a moment ago, it is not free from difficulties and problems. We believe that the common interests between China and the United States outweigh their differences. And even talking about differences, some do exist. Others might have come about because of misunderstandings or misperceptions. But one thing I would like to say, which is very important to us, that is the Taiwan issue. The Taiwan issue has always been the most critical and important issue in Sino-American relationship. Taiwan has always been a part of China. And we are striving for the peaceful reunification of the country through the pattern or the with the principle of one country, two systems. We hope that the U.S. side will abide by the 3 joint communiques in handling the Taiwan issue, because this is very important for the stable and healthy development of Sino-American relationship. There is a notion among some people, not on a large scale, that United States is a status quo power and China is a rising power. There is bound to be clash and conflict between the two nations. I would like to spend some time on this subject. Number one, some people say, look at the 18th and the 19th century, the early 20th century. When a power rises, it tends to come into conflict with the status quo power. But I would like to point out that they were talking about the colonial period. Some powers were competing for land, for treasure, for influence. It's a different age now. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, many countries have become independent. There are now close to 200 countries. There is now the growing role of the United Nations, with its charter being accepted by all countries in the world. And China itself was a victim of colonization and foreign aggression in the past. We will not do to others what we will not do to ourselves. Our foreign policy is an independent foreign policy of peace. The sole purpose of our foreign policy is to create a good environment, both in our neighborhood and in the world, for the modernization of China, with the sole purpose of improving the living standards of the Chinese people. Second, China is developing quite fast, but it has a long way to go. It will stay committed to the independent foreign policy of peace. It wants to have continuous good relations with its neighbors and with the United States. In the last 20 years or so, because of the reform and opening up policy of Deng Xiaoping, which has been followed very firmly by President Jiang and other leaders in China and further developed by them, China has registered an average growth rate of about 9% in the last 20 years. So people's living standards have gone up. In this period, we have lifted about 230 million people out of poverty, almost the entire population of the United States, and it has never been done in the history of mankind before within such a short period of time. Because of the Asian economic crisis and the recent slowdown in the world economy, we have come up against more economic challenges. Nevertheless, China has been able to maintain a 7 to 8% growth rate. During the first half of this year, the growth rate was 7.9%. The IMF thinks that China will be able to maintain a 7.5% growth rate for this year, and more or less the same amount for the next couple of years. We believe that in the next 10 years, through the restructuring of our economy and through further opening up of the country to the outside world, we will be able to maintain a 7% growth rate. Now in China, our export volume, the growth rate has come down because of the world economic situation. But the country's growth always comes from three parts: investment, consumption, and foreign trade. We have one advantage over some other East Asian or Southeast Asian countries. That is, we have a huge real and potential domestic market. So we have been pursuing this proactive fiscal policy, injecting money into the construction of our infrastructure, hoping that it will help to drive up demand and consumption so that we will be able to maintain a 7 to 8% growth rate. It sounds high, but it's necessary for China, given its large population and the number of people who come into the job market every year. The natural growth rate in China is about 1%. That means a net increase of 13 million people a year. So we need to have rather high growth rate to make sure that there is enough employment and the society can remain stable for further nation building. China's development is rather fast, but China still has a long way to go. The current GDP of China is about $1 trillion. The United States has a GDP of about $9 trillion. On a per capita basis, of course, it's 1 to 40. We believe that it will take us at least another 30 or 40 or even 50 years before the whole country can reach the medium developed level in terms of its economy. So China has a long way to go, and even if China develops, we firmly believe that we need to pursue this independent foreign policy of peace to get along well with our neighbors, to get along well with the United States and other big nations in the world. For that matter, China's relations with its neighbors have improved a lot in the last 1 or 2 decades. The United States is flanked by 2 oceans, and it has just 2 neighbors, Canada and Mexico. It's very easy for American kids to remember how many neighbors they have. But in the case of China, many students or adults cannot really recite the names of all the neighboring countries. There are just too many. But we want to get on well with our neighbors. There's a saying in China that a close neighbor is more important than a distant relative. Our neighbors feel that China is sincere to them, and they want to benefit from the economic opening of China, and they see many opportunities for building friendly cooperation. That's why during the first half of this year, when the United States and China relationship was experiencing severe difficulties, quite a few Asian foreign ministers and prime ministers came to this country. They went to Washington, and they emphasized to the American government that they want to see good relationship between China and the United States, and they believe that they can benefit a lot from this good relationship, and they want to get along well both with the United States and China. China attaches a great deal of importance to its relationship with the United States. We believe that a stable, healthy, and ever-improving relationship between China and the United States is in the interest of our 2 nations, and also conducive to peace, stability, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region and in the world as a whole. China is the largest developing country. The United States is the largest developed one. Both are permanent members of the UN Security Council. So we shoulder heavy responsibility for world peace and security, and we are determined to increase our cooperation in this very important undertaking. There are many problems in the world: alien smuggling, environment degradation, drug trafficking, all kinds of diseases, terrorism, and so on and so forth. China wants to increase its cooperation with the United States in all those and many other areas to the benefit of both our nations and the world. Third, it is a grow and grow reality. It's a win-win situation for good relations between China and the United States to develop. We are in the age of globalization. We are in the age witnessing the necessity of expanded cooperation. China will be the host of the Olympics in the year 2008. China will host the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference in October this year in Shanghai. And China will soon join WTO. These are not just things for China. There's a lot that we can cooperate in all these areas. Take just trade, for example. There are enormous opportunities for us to expand our trade. And trade goes beyond the boundaries of our two countries, because our cooperation really covers at least the Asia-Pacific region, and sometimes it has a world impact. China wants to cooperate with the United States in the Asia-Pacific region, and we have cooperated on some sub-regional issues like peace and stability in some areas in Asia. We have cooperated a lot. We urge dialogue and consultation. In the Asia economic crisis, China and the United States collaborated to pull the region out of its economic doldrums. We refused to devalue our currency, and we contributed billions of dollars to the economic recovery of our neighbors, though the per capita income in China was just $800. I believe that it's just like a pie. We have to make a bigger and bigger pie, and United States and China will also have an increasingly bigger share of the pie. When your economy is in difficulty, we are concerned because it will adversely impact China. When our economy should be in trouble, it is also a bad omen for the United States, because China is the largest emerging market in the world, and there are already more cell phone subscribers in China than in the United States. It does not mean that China has pulled ahead of the United States in the relevant technological areas. It means there's a huge and increasing market for U.S. products. And many American companies like Lucent, Motorola, and others, they have all benefited from this market. As China grows, it will be able to contribute more to peace and stability and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region. The United States, in a way, is not a status quo power. The United States, like China, experienced great economic growth in the 1990s. And I think the fundamentals here are good, and you will be able to continue to make economic progress to grow. So it is a grow reality. We grow with you and you grow with us. It's a win-win situation. So that's why the notion of a status quo power versus a rising power is really outdated. It is a product of Cold War mentality and it should not have its place in the conduct of Sino-U.S. relations of present day or the years to come after. But some people have this approach, and they come to certain notions. For instance, I read somewhere saying that, well, China is expanding. It has set up, its enterprises have set up plants in its neighboring countries, how to control some sectors and so on and so forth. And some say that, well, they try to do something somewhere else, talking about Chinese economic projects as strategic basis. And I said to myself, look, we have an opening up policy. It's like a door, okay? You open the door, you welcome your guests, but sometimes you also like to go out. So China has welcomed so much foreign investment in China. There are over 300,000 foreign invested enterprises in China. We are not saying that there are 300,000 foreign strategic bases in China, thinking in military or security terms. And I think it's fair if, with this market economy in China, some companies would like to come out and do some business. They're very much on their own, because China has become a market economy now. And people who go to China will realize it. What I would like to see is really the development of Chinese-American joint ventures, not only in China, but maybe in some other countries as well. Let us cooperate. Another notion is that, it's not right for China to develop too fast. First, the country is not developing too fast. I've told you the many challenges we confront. On the other hand, I think the notion itself is not consistent with the goal of human rights, with the equality of human beings. I said the Chinese people's living standards have improved, but the per capita income in China is only 1/40 of that in the United States. And do the Chinese people have the right to develop? I think most American people, they want to see their fellow citizens of the globe in China to have a better life. And we want to see the American people live even a better life. And you should have a per capita income of maybe $40,000 or more. We'd be happy for that. And I think American people will be happy if the Chinese people can have 1/20 of that per capita income of that of the United States or more. So this notion, I think, is fundamentally incorrect. Anyway, I believe that China and the United States can be very good friends. There's a lot that we can do together. And in trying time, we stand by the American people, and we believe that future course should be a better course for our relationship. That's why we are looking forward to President Bush's trip to China in October this year to the summit between President Bush and President Jiang. We hope and we work towards a far better relationship between us after the visit. That's why we try to promote dialogue in various fields, and that's why we would welcome more and more Americans to come to visit China, especially students. China-American relationship has come a long way. There are many people who have been working very hard for this relationship. And I remember my personal experience with President Nixon. He was the one who opened the relationship on the part of the American side. And when he came to China during his twilight years, once I accompanied him, we were supposed to have a meeting in the Great Hall of the People between him and the leader of China. But when we arrived there, it was a little bit earlier. So suddenly he turned back and said to me, "Yang, can we just go upstairs to the banquet hall and have a look?" Well, it's not pre-arranged, and the Great Hall of the People, like your White House, you are not supposed to go from one room to another without some pre-arrangement. But I said to the security people, "Hey, look, do you recognize him? President Nixon. He wants to go upstairs, so we'll just go upstairs." So we went upstairs. The place is not in its usual order, with that kind of opulence, with shining white tablecloth over every table, with glasses of champagne, good dishes on the food. It's a little bit messy. They were changing things. Carpets were rolled up. But President Nixon just went to the stage, the podium, and looked at the hall itself. And he reminisced with very profound feelings about his state visit to China back in 1972. He said, "I'm standing here making a speech. Prime Minister Zhou Enlai was sitting there, and the hall is crowded with Chinese and Americans. It's a historic moment." And he said, "Our relationship ought to get better and better." And even before he passed away, he strongly advocated the extension of most favored nation trading status to China. I also remember President Carter. It was during his administration that China and the United States established diplomatic relations. Once I accompanied him, he was very energetic. He went to the Great Wall of China, and people normally just walked up to the top of one side and then would tiringly came down. He just ran up to the top of one side, came down, and ran up to the other side, to the top of the other side, and then came down. And some of the Chinese felt rather difficult to keep abreast with him. He's very energetic. And he stays very energetic. I saw him just a couple months ago before he went to China. He still devotes a lot of time to crafting better relations between China and the United States. And he's concerned if there are difficulties. But this relationship is built of many strengths and muscles. at the state level, at the local level, at the cultural level, at the educational level, we have to do a lot more. And coming to Utah, I realized even more deeply how much Utah has contributed to the relationship between China and the United States. I think there are many common points between us. We share many values. There's a strong bond of family here. Respect for the elderly, respect for education. It's the same in China. Utah was a rather backward state, forgive me for saying so, several decades ago, but you pulled ahead. Now it's one of the most dynamic economies in the country. And China has had similar takeoff in the last couple of decades, one or two decades. Utah has not been treated so kindly by nature. It's dry, there is desert here, and you have to use water in a very economic way. And many parts of China are almost the same. China and the United States have more or less the same amount of natural resources, but you have just 1/4 of the Chinese population. On 7% of the world's arable land, we have to support 22% of the world's population, and we have been successful in doing that. We lack water. We lack a lot of water in the western part of the country. So there's a lot that we can learn from you, especially after talking to the governor. I understand that biomedical development, small and medium enterprises in this part of the United States are some of the emphasis for the state economic development program. So I believe that the two economies are really cut out for each other. And Brigham Young University has done a lot to promote all kinds of exchanges between students of our two countries. Your outperforming group tours China on an annual basis. You have many cooperative research projects with China, like water management or language teaching. We have benefited a lot from this relationship, and I would like to thank you, the leaders, the faculty, and the students of this great university, for your contribution to Sino-American relationship, and we want to reinforce these ties with you. And I would like to congratulate you for winning the bid for hosting the Winter Olympics in the year 2002. And I went to see some of the facilities. I was very impressed by the facilities, especially the facilities for ski jump. It's a little bit frightening to stand on top and look down. I'd much prefer to watch it on TV. We wish you great success, and there will be a team coming from China to compete, but more importantly, to cooperate and to learn. The Olympic rings have already become links between our two nations. I hope that we can learn a lot from you so that we can make Beijing's Olympics in the year 2008 a great success. In this relationship, we also have to learn from some courageous sportsmen. When we ski, we will have to go fast to push the relationship forward as much as possible. When we jump, we have to try our best to reach a new height. So let us work together for a better and more beautiful tomorrow for Sino-American relationship. Thank you very much. All right. Maybe take two questions. Okay, we'll take one.
We know some of you need to leave, but we did say there would be time for questions, so the ambassador would like to take two questions, if we might, please. Please. Sir, here in front.
My impression of the university. I'm very glad to visit the university. When I look around, I have a feeling that there is really equality in this university, and there might be slightly more girl students here than boys. And I congratulate you.
Here in the front.
The One China policy is really only carried out in the cities in China. And without this policy, the current Chinese population would be 1.6 billion. So many people might have died of starvation because overpopulation would be terrible, disastrous for China. So we try to encourage people to have just one child. But in the countryside, they have two, and in ethnic minority inhabited areas, they might have 3 or 4 or 5. But as the economy develops, I think that there will be even more flexibility, and we treasure human talents. Thank you. Okay.
Yesterday, when we met with President Hinckley and the First Presidency, they congratulated Ambassador Yang for being only 50 years old and said that he has many years left to contribute, already has contributed much. Join me, please, in thanking him, his wife, and his group for coming today.
Thank you very much. Wish you all the best.